and the point that I was making was bringing this now to what we teach when it comes to our institutions. There's enough material from the likes of Frantz Fanon, the likes of Naim Akbar, the likes of Wade Nobles, the likes of Linda Myers, to Africanize the teaching of how we see ourselves, the likes of Chukanyeri Kamalu, and then, as you said, the breaking down the story of Osar, and Heru, and breaking down exactly what each represents in terms of the community of self. Then we have scholars that have delved into what's the psychology of the oppressor? What are they thinking? And this is where people like Dr. Francis Creswellson comes in, Dr. Bobby Wright. And then you've got scholars like Dr. Edwin Nichols, who have looked at what happens when you've got people who are of African heritage come across people who are the oppressors and interact with each other. And then what are the behavioral complications that you could expect when these two groups of people interact? So what this means then is that as we build an alternative psychology, there's enough material to form a pretty solid basis. And the ideas now will be, how do we test the ideas of these great scholars? How do we critique the ideas of these great scholars? And then how do we develop it into curricula that can be used as the basis for what could go into schools, colleges and universities all over the African world? Not to mention what anybody else has to say, because there could be a whole bunch of other scholars that we don't know about yet, who can then add to this burgeoning canon as we create our own heritage that we can use as the basis of our psychology teaching.
You know, again, what you say is so relevant, that it is an educational, process based on an understanding of the psychology of mind, which releases, shall we say, the spirit, which is the creativity of the individual. And it's not a religion, and it's not a religious effort, because as you know, Kemet had no word for religion, and many African societies have no word for religion. This is not going to come about through the church, whatever church it is. Because the understanding has nothing to do with churchiness and a particular dogma. It has to do with reality, an understanding of the reality of who you are fully as a human being. It has nothing to do with spooky wooky business there of some God up there or out there, or some Messiah who came at one time, or made promises to one tribe of people or whatever. All of that is really nonsense. It's the reality of the world that has always been there from creation, from before the Big Bang, if you will. We can get into that at some other time, because Western science have no answer for anything that occurred, but existed before the Big Bang. All of a sudden, there was a Big Bang. And well, what caused it? We don't know. But they've been able to find pieces of how matter started. So how did evolution come about? Oh, well, it must have been chance mutations. You end up with a human being? Somebody would say, it's like if you take 10 dictionaries and you throw them up in the air and you expect to come up with a Shakespearean sonnet or Julius Caesar or one of his efforts, it doesn't make any sense. All of that is really fantasy, shall we say. And the religion itself is based on fantasy. Again, we get back to the dogma of the virgin birth, which we know never existed, and we know that it's a copy of something that occurred in Kemet, an understanding in Kemet, and it's written on the walls there in a temple in Luxor. I think it was Amenhotep the Third. That's the most explicit one, but there are other images as well in terms of virgin birth, which again was symbolic in terms of how your soul enters, shall we say, the physical body, in terms of your mother's womb and you come into existence. But the point is, which is what you're making, it's an educational process. Because education is the basis of how you teach your culture. Religion, has taken on a role in certain societies, and certainly in most of our Western societies, religion has taken on a role. But the point is that even in a Western society, maybe I shouldn't say even, but in a Western society, religion is at odds really with education, because most educated people don't believe in their religion. Because there's so much nonsense, you see. Whereas what you're talking about, what we're talking about, is an educational system that's based on the reality of who we are and who our ancestors understood us to be, because they were the first human beings, and the first ones that had consciousness and were able to be conscious of consciousness without any of these, cultural appurtenances that came from outside. And with that, shall we say, open mind, they were able to understand themselves and they were able to understand their environment. And as my dad said, God and nature, first made us what we are, and then our own creative genius, we make ourselves what we want to be. And this is really what it is. It's God, if you will, meaning the whole creative act, that come about, somehow, and the creative act produced nature and it produced us, the highest aspect of evolution, and we're all tied together. But for creative genius, then we make ourselves what we want to be without any of these hindrances, such as materialism. But if we just manifest what our true nature is, which is a spiritual nature, and the business, we can go back to the bar, which again is the soul and leaves the body at the time of death. The bar can be recycled. But if you have truly understood yourself in terms of your spiritual understanding and become one with Ra, which is light, energy, and one of the principles of creation, then you become an Ak, AKH, and you are one of the many stars that you see twinkling in the heavens at night, so to speak. So that's a soul who has been totally liberated and with understanding, and then becomes part of the milieu, doesn't return and goes through, if you believe in reincarnation, which our ancestors did, and I think it's present in the Vedic literature as well, of reincarnation and coming back until you really get it right. But you need to be in a society that understands just what we're talking about, and then can create an educational system that allows you to do that. Most of us were brought up in an educational system, whether it's the Caribbean or in England there or in the United States, where I'm at present. That is really egocentric, because everything is based on the mind-body concept of an individual who is separate from everything else. You're separate from your parents. You're separate from the community. You're separate from God. God is out there, and this is the basis of your education. So you grow up with this, egocentric approach, trying to make your way in society. And the only way you can make your way in society with everybody else having the same, understanding is by competition. You have to try to beat up the next guy to get the goodies. It's intrinsic within a society like that. That's based on materialism and individualism. That there's going to be a competition and conflict. And that's true in the individual, it's true in the society. And as you can see, it's true in the foreign policy. The Europeans have been at war ever since they were Europeans. From the Greeks all the way up to the present time, it's war after war after war. So the understanding, which is materialism, which is scientific materialism, which is a religion that exports its spirituality to heaven and an afterlife, is destroying the planet. And we do need a paradigm shift towards what we're talking about, and we need to incorporate it into an educational system that can bring about the transformation of our people and their health and healing, which is what you mentioned.
Yeah, well said, sir, because here's the thing, the people listening to this, as far as what our scholars have produced, they really have produced a revolution in content. And that revolution in content very much can change what we teach in our colleges, in our institutions, and in our universities. And that should be the core, and then we build other ideas around it. So that becomes a core, and then that becomes where we begin our discussions. And then that is how we revolutionize the teaching of psychology.
Beautiful. I think that's a great note to end that, and we're going to continue that in our next sessions, because I think it's of extreme importance. And maybe we can get one or two people to help us delve deeper into this whole aspect of, well, some people call it Black psychology, but I don't like to use that term. But I would say African psychology and education.